Hello and welcome to Alternative to Meds podcast. My name is Debbie Nelson and I am excited because I have Justin Bethoney who has joined us from, hang on just a minute, I got to start that one again because my phone's on and it just dinged. Hold on.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
it was like a little buffered too for a second.
Yeah, no, let me start that one again. So, all right. Hello and welcome to Alternative to Meds podcast. I'm Debbie Nelson, your host, and I'm excited to introduce this wonderful human being that's up in Bend, Oregon, Justin Bethoney. Hello, Justin.
Hi, Debbie.
Justin is a nurse practitioner, and what gets me really excited about him, just like anyone, that whenever I find integrative doctors is he actually treats adolescents, and we have an epidemic of adolescent care that is going on in our country, and so many individuals looking for integrative and holistic approaches. So Justin is the author of the Mental Wellness Diet book. And welcome, Justin. I always get excited when we're able to find practitioners like yourself, and someone certainly who also does adolescent care. So I always like to start it off like, what inspired your book, your practice? How did you get into integrative and functional psychiatry?
Okay, yeah. So my mom was a psychiatric nurse, an RN, a psychiatric nurse for throughout my whole childhood, and so I learned a lot from her. And then I always had just an interest in had an herb garden when I was a kid. I was drinking green tea. I just had a natural interest in natural alternative complementary medicine type stuff. And then I graduated college, and everybody who graduates college at 22, 20, 21 has no idea what they're supposed to do with their life. So I
Right.
thought I was going to go into business, and I had a few jobs in that, but it didn't work out. And then I got into working at group homes and residential treatment centers for kids and adolescents. And that was great. And I loved it. And then I wanted to do more. So my mom encouraged me to look into nursing. And at first I was like, well, I don't know if I want to be a male nurse, but she was persistent, and she talked all about the really great aspects of the career of being a nurse or a nurse practitioner. So I did it. I chose to pursue, and I'm so glad that I did. I really love the nursing philosophy and the nurse practitioner approach.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. What's the difference between a nurse practitioner? Now, I personally know I've gone to both doctors and nurse practitioners, and I actually prefer oftentimes the approach or the personalized. It feels more personalized with a nurse practitioner. But
Sure.
what is the difference? What's your take on what's the difference between both?
Totally. You know, when I first started school, our first month, never forget it. I had my stethoscope and my blood pressure cuff, and just we were all so excited to learn medicine. But the first month of school was a month in class with all the PowerPoints, learning nursing theories and nursing diagnoses, like risk of falls or impaired coping, or hopelessness. These really fuzzy, not really very specific, not scientific, not concrete terms and terminology. And all the nursing theorists, there's plenty of them that had a lot of wisdom. And so that was our first month of school, and it was kind of boring, but the longer that I practiced, the more that I see how important that mindset and considering those aspects of our life, of human beings, of our coping, of our socializing, of our relationships, of our overall health, how important those soft skills are. And so that is kind of the difference between what many would feel when they're with a doctor who's going to practice the medical model, which is life-saving and essential and very effective, and then the nursing philosophy. Nurse practitioners can practice the medical model, they can practice medicine, but they also look at the whole person, just essentially. That's kind of like a buzzword these days, like a holistic whole person plan. I think nursing has been doing that for a century.
No, I never really thought of it that way, but you're right. I mean, honestly, that mentality and that philosophy. So, when you wrote your book, I mean, you've got it where it's on your website, and we'll have your links below this interview where people are able to access this. If you were to give people a synopsis of why or what it is, what your philosophy and what inspired you, what are the high points and the things that you always tell them when you're going through and helping people? Why is diet so imperative, and what made you write this book?
Yeah, I think it's a concept that I just naturally have, that all of us kind of have. Like, I know if I eat better, I can feel better. And you
Right.
just know it. And you kind of know it on this this mystical, esoteric plane that you just kind of know it, but you don't really know the facts, but you know it's true. So I wanted to write a book that tied those two together. So I want people to absorb the book in any way they can, the audiobook or reading it or blogs online or just perusing or skimming is totally fine. And then develop this understanding of when I'm eating, when I make like a salad, or when I eat papaya, or when I eat organ meats, or when I eat animal meat, or when I eat shellfish, when I'm ingesting that, when I'm feeding myself, what is going on there? What nutrients am I taking in? And then where's it going? And how's it getting into the brain? And what's it doing in the brain? And then what it does in the brain, how does that help me respond better to life, or cope better with life, or feel better, or sleep better? And so that's what the book was designed to do. For every bite of food, you want to try to get the most nutrient dense composition of food. And then to have an awareness of all the minerals and all the B vitamins and all the amino acids, what exactly do those do to the brain to help me feel better? So when you connect all those dots, which was my hope in the book, it can be motivating, and it can really open the door and can really get the ball rolling, which is the hardest part.
Yeah, I know that was, I frequently say on the podcast, and I say it over and over again, is that most people have heard from psychiatrists or general psychiatrists that has nothing to do with their mental health. Like somehow the brain is separate from the rest of the body. And we do know that we feel better, but no one eats we're just getting an awareness that we have to eat to feed our brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That there's foods that are nutrients that are absolutely imperative. So, what are some of the foods that you recommend for your diet?
Well, let's take a different angle. Those functions. This book is very functional medicine. The back half of the book is all the science, and it covers 5 basic functions of the brain. So that is responding, and that's a lot about neurotransmitters. And so when environmental stimuli is happening, good or bad, we don't want to over respond or under respond. We want to respond and be able to feel the important good things of life happening, but we don't want to have a chaotic response either. So a balanced response, that's one of the chapters. Fuel, which is about mitochondria and giving the brain the energy so it has the energy to do all the jobs it needs to do for us to feel well. The next one is build, and build is all about the cellular membranes. And the cellular membrane is how our brain communicates within itself. And so those are all the omega-3s and even cholesterol and the fatty substances and minerals to help really amplify and improve the efficiency of communication in the brain so that you can feel well. And the final 2 are kind of related. It's protect and balance. Protect is all about our immune system. More and more information is coming out about how depression is an inflammatory condition, just like many other diseases are chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation. When those immune messengers get up into the brain, they can overstimulate the brain and then cause some of our symptoms for some people. And the last one, balance, is this way in which there's like a gas and the brake in the brain. There's all this excitatory signals and receptors. And then on the counterbalance side, there's all these inhibitory, stop or slow down signals and receptors. And it has to work in concert so that, again, you can feel well and balanced. So those would be the functions. And then there's unique foods, which have higher amounts of nutrients for each of those functions.
Okay. Well, that's exactly like what alternative to meds believes in, is all of those principles when it comes to, balancing a person. With adolescents that you have a practice, obviously, where you treat adolescents, but you treat adults as well. Are you noticing that there's any particular medications that are seeming to be overabundantly prescribed that you're trying to help people find alternatives to for adolescents?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, what's true of all medications is dosing. Sometimes people need medication, and that's okay. Oftentimes, before one medication dose is optimized, brought up to a level, as long as it's not causing side effects, a lot of times we start a med and then we forget and move on and then go get another one and then a different one. And then you're on all these meds and you don't really know personally, and the doctor or provider may not know themselves exactly what each one is doing and how it's helping. So dose optimizing is important to limit multiple meds. And then sometimes medications are too high because In the traditional conventional visit in our healthcare system, it's really a time crunch. And so you have to just make a decision. A lot of times when I'm seeing adults and adolescents, we're not making a decision. We're thinking and we're holding off, and we're giving time, because time is one of the best medicines out there. So we're not being pressured. I spend hour-long visits with people for the follow-up for that purpose, and then to get a better understanding of the context and all that. So, but to answer your question specifically, sleep is a real big problem. And the medication quetiapine, the brand name Seroquel, is really popular. And it's not controversial, but I think it should be. It's very effective to just knock you out and help you to sleep and sleep through the night. And it kind of feels like it solves the problem. But there's a lot of long-term downsides and ways that it can be not great for the brain in the long term. Because Seroquel essentially is an antipsychotic medication.
Yeah. And so just to be very, like, I understand that totally, because I was put on something like that for sleep. And those are probably some of the more challenging conversations that we'll have with individuals that will want to come for residential, is that they don't understand they were put on an antipsychotic. They think it's just simply a sleeping medication. And like you said, tapering off is something of that nature. If someone cold turkeys it, that's why we're always cautious when we do these podcasts, to always advocate for people. Just because we're talking about a certain medication, there are correct ways in order to come off of it, which means you have to work with a professional. Stopping an antipsychotic, one of the side effects is psychosis. So you may never have experienced psychosis before, but you can if you just take yourself off of this medication. So when we do these podcasts, we're always telling people, you may learn something about this, but it doesn't mean go home and say, I'm stopping this because I saw this. Please make sure that you seek out someone like Justin, someone who understands, your doctor who understands with the medications, if you're seeking an alternative and there's a correct way to taper and an incorrect way. So Seroquel in particular, like you say, is an antipsychotic that is frequently used for sleep. And the sad thing is that most people don't realize it is an antipsychotic that has some pretty big side effects that can with long-term use.
Yeah, so low dose Seroquel is primarily like going to work through histamine receptors, which isn't the antipsychotic effect. But Seroquel is a really dirty medication. It's got nicotinic receptors. It affects serotonin, dopamine, and the dopamine blockade is the antipsychotic effect for most antipsychotic medications. And we want dopamine. Dopamine helps us seek. It helps us, be motivated and be curious and have the energy and the motivation and take care of problems and feel the confidence to take care of problems. In psychiatry, if you have schizophrenia or hallucinations or delusions, if you take a medication that tones down that dopamine, then you're not going to have as much of those symptoms. So it's a really great tool for those who need it. But if that's not you and you're taking a dopamine blocking medication, maybe consider if you're having some of those dopamine symptoms: low motivation, poor focus, low confidence, irritations over small things. You want to really take a look at the whole picture.
Right. Are there any other medications that you help? So when someone were to come to you, say that they were on Seroquel, what are some of the things that you would do if someone said, I'm on Seroquel, I want to come off? Is that something that you help people with, like finding an alternative that could work?
Not only Seroquel, lots of medications. Many patients of mine, quote unquote, graduate. Over time, we were conservative and we take it step by step and we lower the medications and we check in between. And we always try to pick a time to reduce the medications where the patient would anticipate this is not going to be, it's the summer, or this is like, a good time. Not a lot of med changes before the holidays.
Oh, I never thought of that. That's great. That's great advice. If people are like experiencing a lot of stress or trauma in their life, or it's a stressful time, it's probably, that's not the perfect time to just
Thanksgiving's out, Christmas is out. Yeah.
That's a great point. What about Adderall? Are you experiencing Adderall? I know that on the news, and there's tons of people, there's a shortage of Adderall, and we have all of a sudden all these individuals. And I know from COVID, we experienced quite a few calls with adolescents that have been put on Adderall during, because their parents were having to homeschool them and recognize like, hey, they're having a hard time focusing. And we have an epidemic of a lot of young children that have been put on it. What have you?
Yeah, a lot of things about that topic. The teens that I've met with over the past few years, they were really frustrated. School was just all worksheets and watered down and boring, and then there was no environmental cues. Like if you were me, I had to. If I went when I wrote this book, I would cubicle myself. I would sometimes use the library, my office, or turn off all electronics. I would get in the zone. I would manage my environment so I could be more productive. These poor kids were having to do it in their room. And that's like the number one sleep hygiene rule right there. Only use your bed for sleeping, so then their video games are right there and they can't focus. So it was really very environmental, which probably exacerbated many people's underlying focus issues. But yeah, nowadays it's crazy. I'll prescribe Adderall for people who it's a good fit for. And then they have to call the pharmacy and see if they have it in stock or when they're getting it in stock. And before the pandemic, pharmacists would not tell any patients what they had in stock for Adderall, kind of for fear of, I don't know, getting robbed or just, there's information that was held closely to the vest. Now it's like the pharmacists, because they're so overwhelmed with all these prescriptions and the backlog, and there is a real shortage out there. Now it's like this negotiation where I send in the script and then they call and then they talk to the pharmacist and the pharmacist tells them, well, you can't do the XR, but you can do the immediate release. I got that, but I don't have it in this dose. Like there's all this like crazy negotiation that's going on. And it has, I think, had the effect of really normalizing Adderall use for our population. It's kind of like as if there was an insulin shortage, pharmacists would step up and really help people get what they need. And, it's not life-saving Adderall. I mean, in some ways it is for people with ADHD, but in many ways it's not. But there's the shortage and the pandemic, it's kind of created a hysteria around it, which does make it challenging for people to understand how it fits in their life.
I agree. And that's the one thing. I mean, because I do, I don't know, suffers the right. I deal with ADHD and it's like, but I've learned alternatives for myself are so effective and I don't have the adverse side effects that, you're not continually taking more and more and more of it. So it did work.
Yeah.
And
Or
it doesn't work it didn't work for me after years of use. So a lot of people I know are in this surge of like trying to find, or if they can't find it, they're realizing how addictive it is that now all of a sudden they literally are having withdrawals from the dependency of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So one overarching philosophy in my practice is that balance. And that balance is about the excitation inhibition, but it's also the balance between the frontal cortex and the back half of the brain. I tell people it's the mullet of mental wellness. So it's business up front.
Okay.
Okay. And so the back is our emotional centers and our visual and auditory cortex and our memories and how we associate and make meaning out of things. And then the frontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex, is our ability to self-control, our ability to think ahead, our ability to pause, our ability to be strategic, problem solve, socialize with other people. That's all frontal cortex stuff. So when we are that adult part of ourselves, one thing that the frontal cortex does is it does all those positive, pro-social, productive behaviors, but it also can reach back and shush the party part of the brain, our emotional upwellings, our cravings, our anger, our distress. It can say, okay, hold on. It's like the kids in the backseat of the car. Hold on, shush, I'm driving here. So there's so many things: exercise, good amounts of sleep. Adderall can do it. Some other medications can help with it. There's nutrition and diet and supplements. There's like a whole mix of things that can really amplify the ability of the business part of the brain to help regulate and manage the back half.
Awesome.
And so that's pretty much every patient for me.
Yeah, honestly, that's every patient that we deal with as well. It's like, how do you balance? And that's what we frequently talk about is balancing people. I always say if someone's out of balance, so there's so many, that's what what type of functional medicine or integrative approaches do you use to be able to help people? I mean, I know you do diet. Do you have other functional medicine testing that you're looking for underlying conditions?
No, I keep it simple. I do testing when patients have the bandwidth and the money and the wherewithal to kind of make the results actionable.
Right.
Not
Right.
everybody fits that. So, I'm pretty simple with diet, sleep, exercise, stress management. Cardio exercise is great for the brain, and that's kind of in the book. Yoga or table tennis or pickleball, anything where you're using coordinated movement and that's really flexing the frontal cortex. That's really important. Practice what you're bad at. So if you're bad at getting started, you got to set these mini goals to help you get started. If you're bad at getting distracted, like the email pops up or the cell phone rings, or you just want to check things or play phone games on your phone, setting structures so you can practice, you can flex this muscle. And the more you flex the frontal cortex muscle, the stronger and better it gets. And so that kind of stuff, simple stuff, and it builds my patient's confidence, and then it gets the ball rolling. A lot of times they'll come in and say, oh, I started doing this, or I quit doing that. Once that motivation and wheels on the motivation train get going, a lot of people find answers that work for them. And they don't have to take my suggestion. They can feel independent, and it all just works.
So when someone wants to work with you, you already mentioned that you don't do the typical little dash in and dash out sort of appointments. I mean, when someone, obviously you're in Bend, Oregon, do you do Zoom in your area in Oregon? So is there people that can do Zoom conference with you as well?
Yes. I can, anybody in Oregon, and then I take a couple Oregon-based insurances, and then
Yeah.
I could do cash pay. So anybody in Oregon, I have the license and the ability to treat them. Outside of Oregon, not at this time. It's Zoom is what I usually use, and that's totally fine. I only ask people to come in person. Another part of the Adderall story is Adderall and Ritalin are controlled substances. And there was the Ryan Haight Act, which was mostly about opiates, but it prevented providers from prescribing controlled substances to people that they hadn't done an assessment in person. So a lot of times that makes sense. In psychiatry, there's arguments on both sides if we really need to see somebody in person. But that had been the rule for so long. Then it got postponed due to COVID. Then it was going to come back on, and then it got postponed again. So I think we're going to kind of wait and see how that shakes out. So usually I just ask that people come in for the first visit.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, because I know our people, when they're interested, like I said, my mission is that how can we continue to give referrals to people that are looking for people like yourself, and books and resources for those individuals. We always like to ask, what are some of the people that you admire or books that you use? I go after, other integrative doctors, people that, do you have any people that you consider some of your guidance that kind of steer you?
Yeah, I think on the functional medicine side of things, I followed Chris Kresser for a really long time. There's Dr. Datis Karazian. I really like his work. There's another naturopath, Dr. Brian Walsh. These guys are all real pragmatic and sensible and science-based, and all their recommendations are referenced, and they've done all the work, and they put a lot of work into sharing what they know. On the psychiatry side of things, so many. Dr. Daniel Siegel has a lot of great books, especially for kids. Mindsight, The Yes Brain, The Whole Brain Child. And these are all really great books for parents to, create a better, more less chaotic framework for what they're dealing with their kids' behavior and what their kids' behavior means, and then how to approach it. And then I've always loved any occupational therapist who's ever put out information. I think occupational therapy is so great and so important for kids. I think physical therapy is great for adults too, with all of our old people injuries. But occupational therapy is how the brain works, how the brain filters and manages and takes in sensory information, and then how that affects how we feel, and then how that affects how much we can do and how we can meet our demands or not meet our demands. It's such a great perspective. And so I always look up to, local and online, all the occupational therapy people putting out content.
Yeah, I think that's honestly the more that we keep on merging both. I always say there's not either or, we need to have both.
Hmm.
For the longest time, it's like you have the psychologists that debate with the psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's like that is not the holistic approach. The approach is how do we help an individual with very personalized care. And, like alternative meds is not about anti-medicine. It's about an integrative approach. Like, how do we help individuals? But more importantly, start giving people tools for long-term wellness. And
Yeah.
that's what your book is about. And
Mhm.
it does seem simplistic, but the reality is, how many times will you drive through you go to the grocery store and you'll see the people that have their whole carts filled with not real food. And they're the ones, their kids are out of control and they're handing them a treat on the way in. And you're like, that kid doesn't, you don't even know how. I couldn't function on that food. I wouldn't be able to function on Lucky Charms and mac
Yeah,
and cheese.
totally. Yeah. I mean, I have children, and then I do try to mindfully limit sugar and whatnot, but we'll get the occasional donut after an activity. And then, you can see it. You can see the running around back and forth like a dog would just that. And
Yeah,
then I can tell, but if you're feeding them sugar every day, you miss that signal because they're having that
all the
reaction every
time.
day.
Right.
I worked for 5 years in Compton in a community mental health center. And, I struggled to get lunch that was healthy, just working there. And then, I kind of came to realize that some people have a low health literacy, not regular literacy, but understanding and making the connections, and just the sense that this is junk food. If that's all that's available in certain areas, it may just be food. And so,
Right.
kind of starting small and creating that awareness, and, letting people know, like, hey, this is a thing. If you feed yourself this is what happens. If you feed yourself that, maybe this is what could happen. So, yeah.
I'll joke all the times where I'll see, because I'm a dog mom and I have my animals, and you'll see people that will be so fanatical about what they will feed their animal, but never have any vigilance for themselves.
Yeah.
Like their dog will only eat the best of food. Don't give them that. Don't give them that table scrap. Don't give them that pizza crust.
Yeah.
That'll make them sick. And I'll think, but they
Uh,
don't hold the same standard for themselves, realizing that if it makes their animal sick, it would make them sick.
I think the same goes for poop too. I mean, do you look at your dog's poop and try to figure out, what's going
Yeah,
on with the gut bacteria there, and what am I
right.
feeding them? And it's some corn here. Okay, I better stay away from that.
That's
We
true.
don't do the same for ourselves. I don't know what's going
Right.
on.
It's strange. I think that we're getting into it more and more. The more that these kind of podcasts and this education and books like yourself, and more people are coming out of the woodwork saying, I'm tired of not feeling good. My kids aren't doing well. I'm not doing well. What do I need to do? And it's a step-by-step approach. Like you said, if we start with the simple things like, what are you feeding yourself, and go from there, like
Mhm.
step by step. So, well, Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to share your work. Your work is vital. Um, we appreciate being able to have you lock arms with this activism that is spreading throughout the country, throughout the world, of individuals like yourself doing integrative care for mental health. If you live in the Oregon area, obviously Justin does Zoom calls, so you're able to actually, maybe if you're not even close to Bend, you'd be able to see him initially, and then you could continue as via Zoom. So, for us, we have a huge amount. We'll get lots of calls for adolescents. So we love being able to find someone that does integrative care for adolescent psychiatry like yourself. So I appreciate you taking the time. We honor your work. And if anyone that wants it, well, the links will be down below for Justin's book, for his website, for any care that you need for both adults or adolescents, and connect with him. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. For information about Alternative to Med Center, give us a call at 888-984-9667.